Welcome back to CameraWest TV. My name is Carlo, and today I'm going to take you guys through my filming setup. So my main camera for filming these videos on CameraWest TV is the Leica SL2-S. Now you might be wondering why the Leica SL2-S. Well, first and foremost, this camera is both a stills and video-centric camera, but I mostly chose this camera for its video capabilities. It's a full-frame mirrorless camera with a 24 megapixel sensor and a 5-axis in-body stabilization. This camera features a backside illuminated sensor, which is a big reason why I chose this camera specifically. It gives me the most dynamic range possible, all while giving me 14-bit color depth in most lighting situations. Now I'm mostly going to focus on the video capabilities of this camera. As far as stills, I think it's, a wonderful camera, and I think it's more than capable. And at 24 megapixels, you are doing your hard drives a favor by saving it some space. Alright, coming back to the video side of things, this camera offers a wide range of frame rates, which is pretty versatile for any type of filmmaker. You have the choice of 8-bit full HD all the way to 10-bit Cine 4K. And I'll probably put the list of specs somewhere around here maybe. This camera also has the ability to record in Rec 709, L-Log Rec 2020, and HGL Rec 2020. All the videos that I shot were in L-Log 4K 10-bit at 23.97 frames per second, mostly to keep with the natural kind of cinematic look. I wanted the natural motion blur that you get from that frame rate, just because I thought it's more appealing than 60 frames per second or 59.94 frames per second. Occasionally I would use the 4K 10-bit 59.94 frames per second for slow-mo or macro detail shots for a lot of the lenses or cameras or whatever I was using, just to kind of emphasize the detail and kind of make for some cool B-roll. I did find that the user profiles on this camera was a huge time saver. Ever since I started using the user profiles, it saved me a bunch of time and sped up my workflow significantly. I'm not manually setting everything before I film. I'm not fussing over what frame rate I'm at. All I have to do is look at what profile I'm using, and I know that that's going to give me the settings for wherever I'm at, whether I'm in the studio, the field, or if I'm doing all these macro detail shots. This camera is pretty customizable in that sense. There's a lot of things that you can program for yourself that makes sense within your workflow. And for me, the user profiles let me do that. Also, pro tip, make sure you save your user profiles on a different SD card just in case you need to update the camera, reset the camera. If anything should happen to the camera, you have those profiles set aside, and you know that if you pick up another one, you can just input it in and you're good to go. Working with L-Log files was pretty new to me. If you watch some of the early videos I made, you can see that a lot of the videos were a little flatter and not as visually appealing. But as I started to edit my own videos and kind of get more comfortable with color grading, I started to utilize these LUTs and kind of figure out how to work with the L-Log files in order to get the kind of color accuracy I was looking for, or if I was going for a more stylized look. The backside illuminated sensor definitely helped me out in all sorts of lighting conditions. And as you can see, I filmed in a variety of lighting conditions, ranging from overcast to bright sun, and even some dimly lit locations. The combination of L-Log and this sensor really helped retain a good amount of highlight detail and shadow detail, even when I was overexposed or underexposed by a stop or two. The 14-bit color depth was really impressive. It gave me a lot of versatility and flexibility when I was working with my files in Premiere, especially for color grading. I feel like paired with the lenses that I was using, I was able to achieve pretty accurate colors, especially for skin tones and just natural environments. For here, I'm able to control the lighting and kind of the white balance. So I think it's pretty consistent all across the board, even when you have all these different color temperatures. Also, to make sure that everything was properly exposed in camera, I was using the classic LUT as a preview just to make sure highlights were where they needed to be and so were the shadows, and just making sure the overall color looked good. And that's pretty much it for the body. Now let's move on to the lenses. For a lot of the stuff that I was filming in the field, 90% of it was filmed with the 28 APO-Summicron-SL lens, and this lens was super versatile. Not only is it an f2 lens, but it's ultra sharp. A lot of the field footage was filmed at f2 with the help of a variable ND filter, and I would occasionally use a quarter pro mist filter just for a stylized look. I didn't use it for all the videos just because at times the effect of the pro mist filter is pretty strong, and I'll show some examples here of what it looked like without the pro mist filter and what it looked like with the pro mist filter. So I would use the pro mist filter depending on the situation. Typically on the foggy days or where it was overcast, it kind of helped bring out and liven up the footage and add this kind of glow. Whereas if it was like in direct sunlight, it almost became a little too distracting. This focal length was perfect for showing off whatever environment we were in, and it made for a relatively small, portable, run and gun type of build. I think having one camera, one lens has been a motto I've kind of said on this channel pretty often. The 28 Summicron mixed with the SL2-S made for a great combo. We were able to cover a lot of ground, especially with how small or relatively small this camera build was. We tried to keep our setup pretty small, and I just didn't want to bring too much gear. Plus, you know, I'm already carrying more gear when I'm talking about all this stuff, so the less gear, the better. Moving on to the next lens. Typically for the studio stuff, I would use the 50 APO-Summicron-SL lens. This lens gave me the compression and sense of scale to show you guys just how big or small certain lenses or cameras were. You know, I think that this lens does a great job. Ultimately, I didn't get to use it too much in the field. It's mostly just been the studio lens. Funny enough, I'm actually using the 50 Summilux SL lens to film this because I only have one of these and I wanted to show you guys what it looks like. Looks just like the 28, which is kind of nice. The nice thing about these Summicron lenses is the form factor. As you can tell, they're pretty much the same size and they're relatively the same weight compared to this 24-70 you see in front of me. But we'll get to that lens in a second. And I use these lenses pretty much all the time. I will say they're super sharp, they're pretty compact, and yeah, I really like the look. All right, so moving on. Like I mentioned before, any type of B-roll or macro shot that I would shoot for a lot of the intros for thumbprints and signatures, that was all done with the 60 TL lens. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would I use a crop sensor lens on a full frame camera? And does that mess with the frame size and resolution and, you know, all of that good stuff? My answer is, honestly, I didn't see much of a difference. You know, I think the footage holds up, and I think the fact that it's a crop sensor lens, and even though you are cropping into the sensor, it did the job. It is still an APO lens, and it allowed me to get these really fine details amongst various lenses, and I was able to get up close and show every nook and cranny of everything that I've shot. So I will say that this lens specifically is really good. It has a very similar optical formula to the R version of this lens. That may be a future thumbprints and signatures episode, but who knows? As far as I know, I love using this lens. I think it does the job, especially if I want to show off any type of detail or things that the minimum focus of these lenses can't achieve. So I definitely recommend, if you're looking for good macro lenses, this should be on your list. I also forgot to mention that for the 50 and the 60, I didn't use any ND filters. Same with the lens that I have on the camera right now. No ND filters, just studio lighting. Now to go over the final lens, as you can see, I have a 24-70 on the Leica SL2-S. Now, originally when I started making these videos, I did kind of want to use this lens, but I strayed away from it just because of how big it is or how big it appears to be. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of zoom lenses. I do think that it does slow you down at times and it almost gives you too many options. But in some of the later videos that I made, such as the Cinestill review video and the Why the M6 video, I felt like I wanted to switch things up and kind of show different perspectives. And I also understand that sometimes whoever I have filming me can't always be as close as to where I am, or it's almost limiting for them because they can't be as creative as they want to be. So I decided to try out the 24-70 and I ended up really liking it. The only thing is, for the videos that I filmed with this lens, I had to use a 4-stop ND filter versus the variable ND because they're different thread sizes and this was too small for this lens, so I had to make do with that. And that's probably why those videos look a little different. The ISO is cranked up a little higher than I normally would like, but I did like the visual look that I got from using this lens with a high ISO. Overall though, even though this combo is much heavier than this setup, it did make for much steadier shots, and I was able to kind of get a variety of different shots rather than thinking about having to switch lenses. I do think the image quality really holds up, especially in the Y the M6 video. Pretty much 99% of that video was filmed with this setup right here and just this alone. And I'm pretty happy with how that visually turned out. Another benefit of the SL line is the fact that you are able to adapt pretty much all of Leica's lenses to this body. So you're not limited to just the L mount lenses. You're able to adapt M mount, R mount, PL mount, even Leica thread mount lenses. Heck, you can even adapt any type of lens as long as you have the adapter. And the benefit of that is being able to achieve different characteristics through your specific lens choice. I also forgot to mention that there is a L mount alliance between Sigma and Panasonic. So those two manufacturers also offer L mount lenses, and you can adapt these L mount lenses to those L mount cameras. And it's nice because you get a little habitat of native lenses and you can switch them around depending on what kind of build you're looking for. So one of the unavoidable issues with filming with this camera was obviously the autofocus. I personally don't think it's the greatest when it comes to autofocus. It does have functions like an automated follow focus, where you can program focus points and the camera will kind of go back and forth between those preset points. But for me, I had to rely on just the normal autofocus and kind of hope for the best. Half the time the autofocus would nail focus and would look amazing, but the other half of the time, sometimes it would just be hunting. So then I would be left with some unusable footage, but at least I could use the audio. But when it came to videos like the Y the M6 video, I would just kind of go into manual focus and take control myself. The other drawback for that is that it is focused by wire with these lenses, so you don't really feel much resistance when you are getting from your minimum focus to your maximum focus or infinity. And sometimes I would miss, but I felt like I was pretty good at judging the range of where people were at. And as far as studio use, I mean, I'm just sitting here, so it's pretty much a fixed focus. Plus I'm controlling the camera with the Leica Photos app via my iPad. It lets me select my focus, record, and just make sure everything looks proper in the frame. So one other thing that bugged me about this camera was the fixed LCD. I do think if you're going to have a video-centric camera, it should almost be a requirement to have some kind of swivel screen or something that you can flip up, because at times I do think that this motion here is not the most comfortable or easy on your arms or shoulders. So to combat that, sometimes I would use an external monitor just to make sure I had the proper angle and I had a bigger screen to look at, just to make sure I could see all this information that was being presented and recorded. But if you are filming things kind of stationary and by yourself, I definitely recommend the Leica Photos app. It definitely works in a pinch, especially if you just want to see how things look. And as for battery life, I typically go through about 2 batteries per filming session. If I'm in the field, I usually bring around 3 to 4 batteries just in case. You never know what could happen. Also, if you only happen to have 1 battery, you are able to charge this camera via USB-C on the side port of this camera. I also forgot to mention that this camera offers a full HDMI port as well as auxiliary ports for headphones and an external mic. Also, if you're wondering what I use for the external mic setup, I use a Saramonic Blink500 Pro, and that gives me a wireless receiver and 2 transmitters to let me attach to myself or to whoever is speaking, and sound just directly syncs to the camera. So this brings me to my last point about this camera, and it's the price point. Now we're all familiar with Leica's price point, and it's not cheap by any standards. But the great thing about this camera specifically is the L mount alliance that it has with Sigma and Panasonic. So I mentioned this earlier in the video. The fact that you're able to get third-party lenses for a fraction of the price of these Leica lenses, I think is a good option, especially if you're able to achieve a similar look, if not an identical look, to these lenses at a much cheaper price point. And if the size and form factor is kind of what dissuades you from using this camera, just remember that you can also adapt M lenses or R lenses, even screw mount lenses to this camera, and you're able to have a much more discreet, more maneuverable camera build. Plus, you can create a visual signature that's unique to the lenses that you have. Although the SL2-S is not as advanced as other cinema cameras or hybrid cinema cameras on the market, I feel like this camera offers a variety of options for professional users as well as the casual video maker. The SL2-S is truly a workhorse in the sense that you can switch between stills and video with the press of a button, making it truly a one-person crew. The controls and the menus on this camera are very simple and intuitive. Plus, the user profiles come in handy when you are filming with different frame rates or you just know that you're shooting in consistent environments, much like this set. I've used this camera for over a year and a half along with pretty much this entire setup, and in my own opinion, I think the Leica SL2-S has something to offer for any type of videographer, whether you are a professional or you're just starting out. Well, that wraps up this video for CameraWest TV. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing how I filmed all these videos, and I hope there were some good takeaways for you to try for yourselves. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of my video setup, or what your preferred setups are if you use this camera or if you've never used this camera. Is there anything I could improve to it, or what is your opinion? I'm always open to improving or changing things, so please let me know down in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe this video, and also don't forget to check out LeicaStoreSF.com and CameraWest.com to see more Leica products and non-Leica products. Once again, this is Carlo from CameraWest TV. I'll see you next time. Maybe I'll see you next year. Happy New Year.